아리랑 아라리요 아리랑 고개로 넘어간다 힘껏 달려 멈추지 마라 세상 끝까지 가자 아리랑 아리랑 가라리요
Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. U.S. President Donald Trump says Iran gave Washington a very big present related to oil and gas, suggesting progress in talks between the warring countries. This comes as the U.S. has reportedly sent Iran a 15-point peace plan via Pakistan. Qatar has declared force majeure on long-term LNG supply contracts with 4 countries, including South Korea, after missile attacks damaged key energy facilities. Seoul is moving to strengthen diplomatic coordination with Gulf partners to secure alternative energy supplies. Suspected drug ringleader Park Wang-yeol arrived at Incheon International Airport this morning after being temporarily repatriated from the Philippines. The Korean government had spent 9 years working to bring Park back, who has been serving a 60-year sentence in the Philippines for the murder of 3 Koreans in 2016. We begin with the latest on the Middle East conflict, where diplomacy and military moves are unfolding in parallel. U.S. President Donald Trump says a recent move by Iran could mark a turning point as Washington pushes to bring the war to an end. Our Mullin has the details.
U.S. President Donald Trump says negotiations to end the war in the Middle East are already underway and pointed to what he described as a major present from Iran that could signal a path towards de-escalation.
It was oil and gas related, and it was a very nice thing they did, but what it showed me is that we're dealing with the right people.
Speaking at the White House on Tuesday local time, Trump said the move was tied to energy flows through the Strait of Hormuz, a critical global oil route that has been severely disrupted during the conflict. He suggested the gesture reflects a broader shift in Iran's approach, saying Tehran is now talking sense in negotiations and has agreed it will never develop a nuclear weapon, something he described as the top condition for any ceasefire. He also argued the conflict has resulted in what he called regime change after repeated U.S. strikes on Iran's leadership. According to the New York Times, Washington has also sent Iran a 15-point proposal aimed at ending the war, addressing key issues such as Tehran's nuclear and ballistic missile programs and the security of key maritime routes. The plan was delivered through Pakistan, which is now emerging as a key diplomatic channel in the conflict. Pakistani officials have publicly offered to host talks between the two sides, while its military leadership is believed to be acting as an intermediary. But even as diplomatic efforts ramp up, the U.S. is also reinforcing its military posture in the region. The Associated Press reports that around 1,000 troops from the Army's 82nd Airborne Division are being prepared for deployment to the Middle East in the coming days, adding to thousands of Marines already heading to the region aboard Navy ships. The units are trained for rapid response missions, including securing key infrastructure and operating in hostile territory, highlighting the risk of further escalation even as talks continue. Meanwhile, Iran has indicated it is open to considering proposals for a lasting agreement, according to CNN, but only if they include sanctions relief and guarantees over its right to peaceful nuclear activity. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, Qatar has declared force majeure on major LNG supply contracts after missile attacks damaged key export facilities, raising fresh concerns over global energy security. Seoul is now scrambling to secure alternative supplies as disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz threaten prolonged instability in oil and gas markets. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
Qatari state-owned energy company Qatar Energy has declared force majeure on long-term liquefied natural gas supply contracts with South Korea, China, Italy, and Belgium after missile attacks damaged key energy facilities. Strikes last week targeted installations belonging to the company in Ras Laffan, disrupting operations and affecting approximately 17% of Qatar's exports. The clause allows companies to suspend contractual obligations when unforeseen events make performance impossible. Qatar's energy minister said repairs to the damaged LNG facilities could take 3 to 5 years. With energy supplies already affected by the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, South Korea has moved to strengthen diplomatic coordination with Gulf partners. Foreign Minister Choi Hyun held phone talks with Oman's Foreign Minister Badr bin Hamad Al Busaidi on Tuesday and requested cooperation in securing alternative supplies of liquefied natural gas and crude oil. During the call, Cho also thanked Oman for its support for the movement of South Korean peacekeeping troops deployed in the region, as well as for its help evacuating South Korean nationals after the outbreak of hostilities at the end of February. The Omani foreign minister noted that major infrastructure across Gulf countries has suffered damage from recent Iranian attacks and called for Seoul's continued interest and support. Both sides agreed to deepen bilateral ties and cooperate in efforts to restore peace and stability in the Middle East. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The South Korean government will launch an emergency task force to help cushion the economy against the impact of the Middle East crisis. At a briefing this morning, Prime Minister Kim Min-seok said he will lead the emergency economic headquarters, which will bring together the finance, industry, health, and foreign affairs ministers, as well as the chairperson of the Financial Services Commission. The task force will support the implementation of key measures discussed at emergency economic meetings, chaired by President Lee Jae-myung. It's set to begin operations next week and will meet twice weekly. The announcement comes a day after President Lee called for a government-wide emergency response system, warning of growing uncertainty in the supply of crude oil and natural gas amid the conflict in the Middle East. Oil prices have been swinging sharply over the past few weeks amid tensions in the Middle East, raising concerns over crude price volatility. For more on this, we're joined today by Professor Shin Myung-gyu, Associate Professor of Economics at Yonsei University. Professor Shin, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
So what's your assessment of the recent movements in oil prices, and do you expect prices to come down once this conflict ends?
Let me say my conclusion at first. So I don't think the oil price will go down very soon. And then let me give you some reasonings. And there are so many fluctuations in the oil prices every day these days. And this seems to be quite natural, given that the state of the world changes every day and every time. So as we observe these days, the US president sometimes sends a signal that the situation would become worse, and then he changes his words or stance after a while, that there can be a kind of the peace talk between the US and Iran. So given that we see many complex signals about the current state of the economy, it is quite natural that oil price swings a lot. And that's why we see $100 per barrel in the morning, and then it drops by 10% on the same day. And the CEO of Chevron, which is one of the major energy companies in the US, also expect that the current oil price does not fully reflect the current situation, which hints that the price might surge even further once the oil inventory runs out in many countries. And I fully agree with that kind of idea. So unless there is a dramatic change in the current state in the Middle East, I expect that there still is a room for the oil price to increase more then going down with more fluctuations.
I see. The head of the IEA, International Energy Agency, also said the impact of the current energy crisis is equivalent to the two major oil crises in the 1970s and the 2022 natural gas crisis after Russia invaded Ukraine, all put together. How serious is the current situation?
Yes, the current situation seems to be somewhat similar to what we experienced in the 1970s. This is essentially because the war affects the energy prices, which can eventually increase the overall price level, and so potentially drag down the global economy, which can lead to the severe crisis. But I have a little bit different opinion from the IEA prison because we need to understand how much the global economy depends on oils, and actually it has increased over time. First of all, the US economy, which is one of the important engines of the global economy, does not rely on the oil imports from the Middle East than when we compare that to 1970s. Importantly, the shale gas will become more profitable when the oil price surges, which ironically helps the US economy. And also, if we just look at the Korean economy, the situation might not be that bad compared to what we experienced in the 1970s. I did some analysis with my colleague, and what we found out was that if there is an increase in oil price that originated from the supply side of the oil market, differently from what we usually suspect, that does not really hurt the Korean economy in a significant way. So unless the war becomes more worse, and unless it becomes more prolonged than we usually expect, then I don't think the current situation becomes like the energy crisis that we experienced in the 70s.
I see. So the current situation is a bit different from what we saw in the 1970s. And gold is typically seen as a safe haven asset, especially in times of war like this and other crises. But why are gold prices falling?
Yes, as you just point out, gold is usually believed to be an asset that gains its value or demand during the recession or when the global economy faces severe problems that we experience these days. Because it is believed to be relatively a safe asset than the other assets. However, this time seems to be a little bit different from before because of the expectation that interest rate might hike in the near future, or at least it will not become lower as previously expected. And this is because the surge in oil price can result in inflation, as I pointed out earlier, and the Fed or the other central banks might need to fight against the inflation by raising the target rate. And gold does not yield any interest when you hold it. So demand for it becomes lower when the rate of return for the other assets or any kind of alternative assets increase, which lead to lower gold prices.
I see. And as for South Korea, the Korean won has weakened to its lowest level in over a decade, and it actually hit a 17-year low against the US dollar this week. So to what extent is the ongoing conflict affecting the Korean economy?
Yeah, most importantly, the uncertainty about the trade policy and also geographical risk around the world does not seem to be fully resolved as we experienced recently. And I, again, together with my colleague, found out in our recent research that regardless of the uncertainty surrounding the Korean economy, whether it comes from the overall obligate uncertainty or particular geographical risk, Korean won loses its value against the dollar or against the dollar when the uncertainty level increases, as we see these days. This seems to be mainly because investors usually choose kind of the flight to safe strategies in their portfolios when they face high risk in countries like Korea, and then they just change their they change their allocation toward more safe assets like the U.S. Treasuries or the others. And because the uncertainty regarding the state of the war in the Middle East, I guess the current situation that the value of Korean won becomes really low will not be resolved very soon.
I see. All right, Professor Shim, thank you so much for your time and insight today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Suspected drug trafficking ringleader Park Wang-yeol has been temporarily repatriated to South Korea from the Philippines. Park, who arrived at Incheon International Airport this morning, has been serving a 60-year sentence in the Philippines for the murder of 3 Koreans in 2016. He's also suspected of orchestrating large-scale drug distribution in South Korea through social media, even while behind bars. His return followed a direct request by President Lee Jae-myung during a summit with Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. earlier this month, which helped resolve the repatriation process after more than 9 years of difficulties. The transfer was carried out under an agreement that allows suspects to be temporarily handed over for criminal proceedings while their trial or sentence is paused in the Philippines, with South Korean authorities now launching a full investigation into Park. Meanwhile, the cabinet has approved 2 bills aimed at stripping prosecutors of their investigative powers. The bills stipulate creating 2 new agencies, one that will exclusively handle investigations under the Interior Ministry and the other in charge of indictments under the Justice Ministry. The investigation agency will look into 6 major crimes, including corruption and those related to the economy or drugs. The current prosecutor's office will be abolished in October, the first major change in 78 years, following decades of debate over readjusting the prosecutor's powers. The legislation was led by the ruling Democratic Party amid objections from the main opposition People Power Party. On the cultural front, Netflix says 18.4 million viewers worldwide tuned in to watch BTS comeback stage during the live broadcast of BTS Comeback Live Arirang on Saturday. According to Netflix on Tuesday, the program ranked in the weekly top 10 in 80 countries, while reaching number 1 in 24 countries, including South Korea, Mexico, and Japan. The figures include audiences who watched the initial live stream as well as those who streamed the performance again within the following day. BTS fever is spreading beyond the concert stage in Seoul. Museums are welcoming global fans with special exhibitions and events. Our Chung Il-im shows us how.
BTS's comeback show may be over, but fans can relive the energy in Seoul. Following the weekend concert, major national institutions are welcoming the influx of global fans with special exhibitions and events incorporated with Korean culture. At the National Museum of Korea, fans can view traditional artifacts such as the 10-story stone pagoda and moon jar, pieces known to have captured the BTS members' interest, with an English guide provided. But the experience goes beyond the exhibits. A major highlight is the exclusive collaboration between BTS's 5th album Arirang and the museum's official merchandise brand Mute. Fans have been buying items ranging from traditional Korean-themed hairpins to modern clothing and bags, blending Korea's rich heritage with the group's new music.
I think that's the highlight. Like they try to incorporate the national treasure, if I'm not mistaken, like the bell, into the merch. So I think it's a really nice touch. Also Korean, also BTS.
Over at the National Folk Museum, games that members actually played from the popular YouTube show Run BTS have been brought to life. The outdoor K-playground offers tourists a chance to try their hand at traditional games like spinning tops or 팽이, 투호, 제기차기, and 딱지치기. Visitors laugh and show enthusiasm for Korea's oldest games. Bullseye or not, games like 투호 and spinning tops offer a truly unique experience. By playing traditional Korean games, fans aren't just having fun. They're connecting with their favorite stars on a whole new level. Over at the National Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art's dedicated listening space, Love Quarter, fans dive into a completely different vibe. Bathed in blue light, the space is filled with BTS's new title track, Swim. Paper installations move with the wind like ocean waves, giving visitors the surreal sensation of swimming through the music as they read the lyrics surrounding them.
It's great. I mean, it has like a lot of like the lyrics, and it's really nice to see it. It really feels like you're in the ocean, so like it's a very immersive experience.
The cultural celebration extends to other venues as well, featuring a BTS time capsule at the National Museum of Korean Contemporary History and an exhibition of Korean literature that inspired the group's music at the National Library. 정혜림, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. Russia launched its largest daytime drone assault of its war with Ukraine on Tuesday, killing 3 people, wounding dozens, and damaging a UNESCO World Heritage Site in western Ukraine. More than 550 drones hit Ukrainian cities in broad daylight, a deliberate break from Russia's usual tactic of nighttime attacks. Combined with an overnight bombardment of missiles and hundreds more drones, Russia sent nearly 1,000 long-range drones into Ukraine in under 24 hours. In the western city of Lviv, closer to Vienna than to the front lines, 22 people were injured, and a centuries-old monastery in the city center was damaged. In Ivano-Frankivsk, a drone strike killed a soldier and his daughter. President Zelensky, in his nightly address, called the scale of the attacks proof that Russia has no intention of ending the war. Traders placed $500 million on oil prices falling exactly 15 minutes before President Trump announced a delay to strikes on Iran's energy infrastructure. At 7:49 p.m. Korean time on Monday, traders moved over 5,000 lots of Brent and WTI crude futures. 15 minutes later, Trump posted on Truth Social that constructive talks with Tehran were underway, and oil prices collapsed 15% in minutes. In the 60 seconds following Trump's post, 13 million barrels worth of oil futures changed hands. Brent crude and WTI both fell by $13 a barrel. The Securities and Exchange Commission, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, and the White House all declined to comment on the spike in trades ahead of Trump's post. It remains unknown who placed the trades. Oil prices are still more than 40% above pre-conflict levels, with roughly 1/5 of the world's daily oil supply cut off by the war in the Middle East. The U.S. Senate confirmed Mark Wayne Mullin as Secretary of Homeland Security on Tuesday. Mullin, a former MMA fighter and a businessman, replaces the fired Kristi Noem. He signaled during his confirmation hearing that he would scale back some of Noem's most aggressive immigration tactics, including warrantless entries into private homes. Public support for the Trump administration's immigration crackdown has dropped in recent months, and the White House has privately signaled a shift in messaging away from mass deportations and toward targeting criminals. Liverpool superstar Mohamed Salah announced Tuesday that he will leave Liverpool at the end of this season, ending a 9-year run that made him the 3rd highest scorer in the club's history. The 33-year-old Egyptian forward scored 255 goals in 435 appearances for the club, winning 2 Premier Leagues and a Champions League. Liverpool confirmed the departure, calling Salah one of the greatest players in the club's history. Salah and the club reached an agreement over his exit 1 year before his contract was set to expire. This follows a public falling out with manager Arne Slot that included Salah telling reporters the club had thrown him under the bus. He has yet to announce his next move.
It's been raining on the southern coast and Jeju Island with around 5 to 10 millimeters in the forecast. However, it's a different story across the central regions and parts of Gyeongsang-Pukto province where dry weather alerts are being in place. And considering the recent stretch of dry conditions, the risk of wildfire is high, so extra caution is a must. Temperatures have been soaring way above the norms, but air quality has been an issue. Except on Jeju, the whole region will be trapped in dusty air again, with an ultrafine dust advisory issued for parts of Gyeongsang-do provinces. And this afternoon, the capital area in Daejeon will be getting up to 19 degrees Celsius. Daegu makes it to 17 degrees, while Jeju only makes it to 13 degrees Celsius this afternoon, but will be dust-free. After today, most regions will stay mostly clear with more late April warmth, but air quality will remain a headache for many of us.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.
The snow is accumulating rapidly. Temperatures are dropping fast, so stay safe out there. Look behind me.
A country where traditional and modern cultures coexist.
Where you can explore spectacular landscapes and nature.
Savor the delights of traveling at every turn.
Where? Korea, of course.
There are some must-visit places in Korea. Ones that appear in every tour guidebook: Hangang River, Gyeongbokgung Palace from the Joseon Dynasty, and
Yes, these are essentials, but I want to go somewhere a little different. I don't have to follow the guidebook. For example, filming locations for K-pop music videos or K-dramas and movies.
traveling is all about taking it slow. A long walk at your own pace or even zoning out somewhere quiet. Doesn't it sound relaxing?
You travel for the experience, trying something new in a foreign place, de-stressing and making lifetime memories, taking tons of pictures along the way.
70% of the Korean territory is mountainous. Naturally, hiking is a very popular pastime in Korea. Not your kind of activity? Trust me, the view will make the effort worth it. Just catch your breath by the cold stream in the valley.
Korea is surrounded by the sea on three sides. From the beach, you can enjoy a wide open view as well as various water activities. But the riverside is great too. There's plenty to see and do.
If you're in Korea, you can't miss the night view full of dazzling lights.
Yes, even the same place can have a totally different vibe at night.
Want to make unforgettable memories?
How about traveling to all corners of Korea? Join us next time to explore more about Korean culture.
Held its first debate over the weekend.
The economy is expected to expand 2.5% this year.
Team Korea's ties with its global partners on the sidelines of the status UN summit. A massive drone attack on Ukraine overnight on Monday and Tuesday. Arirang.
We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Wednesday, March 25th here in Seoul. I'm Isujin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Wonbin.
Good morning.
Good morning. Also Niles with us.
Good morning.
Good morning. And both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So as we enter the middle of the work week, let's take a moment to step back from the daily rush and look at how technology is quietly but rapidly reshaping the way we live and work. From the factory floor to global supply chains, artificial intelligence is no longer a distant concept. It's becoming a core driver of industrial transformation. And nowhere is that shift more visible than in manufacturing, where some of Korea's biggest companies are making bold moves. So Wonbin, how are major firms moving toward AI-powered autonomous factories?
Yeah, so we're actually hearing different approaches from different companies in Korea. One good example is Hyundai Motors. Hyundai Motors announced that they will be transitioning their manufacturing process into an autonomous manufacturing platform utilizing AI and robotics technologies. For the viewers, Hyundai Motors has put in a lot of effort, time, and resources into the development of physical AI by acquiring Boston Dynamics in 2021. Now, if we remember the CES in January, Hyundai showcased their robot Atlas, a robot designed for factory labor with fully rotating joints. And if you remember, it was also popular for having a supernatural walk posture that would dramatically increase their work productivity. It was a great example of how serious Hyundai is towards AI automation. And for Hyundai, manufacturing was the biggest target for in terms of reducing cost, and automation can dramatically reduce the cost of manufacturing.
So what we're looking at here isn't just automation, it's a complete redefinition of manufacturing itself. A factory that runs around the clock, powered by AI and humanoid robots, really signals how far this technology has come. And Hyundai isn't alone in this push, so how are other firms also accelerating their shift to AI-driven factories?
That's right. Samsung Electronics also announced that by 2030 that it will transform its domestic and overseas production plants into AI-driven factories by actively applying AI across the entire manufacturing process. They also stated that AI will be used in environmental safety to proactively detect potential risk factors in production sites and prevent accidents.
Right, so this is a notable shift, not just toward efficiency, but toward smarter and also safer workplaces. And using AI to anticipate risks before they become real problems could significantly change how safety is also managed on the factory floor. So we're going to talk more about this, but first, let's take a look at the screen. Major companies in South Korea are unveiling ambitious plans to bring artificial intelligence into the heart of manufacturing, pushing toward fully autonomous production systems. While these innovations promise gains in efficiency, safety, and quality, they're also raising important questions about the future of jobs. Today on News Generation, we take a closer look at how feasible AI-powered autonomous factories are with today's technology, how young people are reacting to these changes, and how we should approach employment in the age of AI. As we just saw in a video, AI-powered factories are no longer just a futuristic concept. They're already beginning to take shape in parts of the manufacturing process. But that raises a key question about how far current technology can actually take us. So how feasible are fully autonomous factories with today's AI technology?
Well, automation with robots is actually already quite well implemented in multiple different industries, especially in manufacturing such as cars and semiconductors. They use commercial robots and sensors to accurately build and inspect their final products. However, in the recent years, AI technology is allowing companies to leverage their current robot equipment and infrastructures by using virtual factories, which is used to simulate and calculate the optimal manufacturing productivity and efficiency. So this isn't a completely new thing for the companies. They already had automation in the system, but the recent AI technologies are allowing the companies to leverage it and go above and beyond.
But it still sounds like what we have now is still more partial autonomy rather than a fully self-running factory. So that brings us to the limitations. So what are the current biggest hurdles to operating a fully autonomous factory right now, Noem?
They're not fully taking over just yet. There's still no general purpose robot that can do everything exactly like a human. Humans still have to assess the situation, assemble the products, and solve problems when they arise. And the currently commercialized robots can only perform maybe one or two of these tasks. So fully automating an entire large-scale factory is quite difficult at this point. Additionally, operating a factory completely autonomously with the current technology would require massive data centers and GPUs. So that would make it quite difficult to maintain due to financial reasons.
Right, so while the vision is clear, the reality is that we're not quite there yet, both in terms of technology and cost. And that gap is exactly where a lot of the tension seems also to be coming from, especially when you consider how this directly, obviously, impacts workers on the ground. So how are workers and labor groups reacting to these AI-driven factories?
Yeah, so like you just said, for the workers, it's definitely not the most ideal situation because obviously the AIs are coming to threaten and take their jobs. The Hyundai Labor Union actually announced that not a single robot will enter the factory before any negotiations or further agreements are made. And with this situation, there are mixed opinions regarding what's happening. Some are saying that they are overreacting, but some are also agreeing that anyone would do the same if their jobs were in danger. However, although there are some arguments, the workers do agree that the evolving technology will eventually replace and automate the majority of the tasks that they are currently working right now.
And I guess this shows how this isn't just about technology, it's about trust and job security. And as with many technological shifts, the reaction seems to be a mix of resistance and reluctant acceptance. But interestingly enough, the response isn't the same across all generations. So how do younger generations view this new wave of AI-driven factories now?
Right, so the MZ generation tends to view this issue from multiple angles, but they do worry about workforce reductions like the older generation. However, they do have lower expectations for lifelong commitments at employment and jobs to begin with, so they don't strongly resist it. They also place high value on work-life balance and tend to avoid hazardous tasks, so they see the potential benefits of these AI-driven factories. Such as doing less dangerous work and having reduced overtime. As a result, they're relatively positive, surprisingly, about AI factories themselves, but their response may vary depending on how companies handle the job-related issues in the future.
So it is interesting to see that balance. Less fear, but also less attachment to traditional job security. So in a way, their response may ultimately depend on how companies manage the transition, not just the technology itself. So we also wanted to hear directly from our viewers. So we ran a poll on the Arirang News YouTube channel asking, what do you think about the expansion of AI-driven factories? And here's what the results showed. So opinions appear divided, but with a clear majority expressing concern, as 64% say they are against it, compared to 36% who support the move. So this is quite telling. Despite all the excitement around AI, a clear majority still feels uneasy about where this is heading, especially when it comes to jobs and long-term security. So to gain a more in-depth and personal perspective, we're going to talk to someone who has previously worked at manufacturing plants in the US. That conversation is coming up right after the break, so don't go anywhere.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search out channel Arirang News. Click Posts and cast your vote in the poll. Make a new type of news with us.
Joining us today is Choi Han-eun, who previously managed facility and equipment operations across assembly lines at 2 Korean-owned manufacturing plants in the US. So hello, thank you so much for connecting with us today.
Hello, thanks for having me today.
So how advanced were autonomous systems in the areas that you worked in?
When it comes to autonomous systems in the areas that I worked in, I wouldn't say it was much of autonomous systems. I would see more of the automated sort of the systems that humans have to involve. But there are some of the advancement definitely more recently. But then when it comes to, like I said again, not so much of autonomous systems I've seen for the past few years that I've worked in the factories.
I see. Thank you for your overview. Now, as we just talked about, now there's a transition of that semi-autonomous into the fully autonomous system. Now, how do you and your coworkers feel about this change?
Yeah, actually, my coworkers and I often talk about this as as more advancement comes in place in the factory. However, a lot of the coworkers think that it's not good. It's not good for themselves because they also could lose jobs. But when it comes to production and also pre-production stage of the factory operation, it still has a lot of the humans have to be involved in order to proceed to the next steps. Yeah.
Right.
So my last question for you today is, what are your personal views on AI-driven autonomous factories, and how are you preparing for it?
Yeah, I see the coming up, like, for example, like Samsung and some other companies have announced, having autonomous systems by 2030 would be
quite difficult to reach as in the perspective of the laborers, because a lot of the works that we have actually been involved in working those equipments. That's the only view that I have today.
All right. So you don't see it as very plausible for 2030.
Yeah, but again, it's when companies like big companies like Samsung, they announce things like that, and it's something that I'm not very aware of. I'm not very knowledgeable of, so I can't really say much about they can actually they will do it or not, but they said they will do it, so they'll probably do it. But for me as a just laborer at the factory, I haven't seen a lot of the autonomous systems. So, yeah.
Real quick before I let you go, you mentioned you managed facility and equipment operations, and you said some parts, while they were not autonomous, they were automated at certain aspects of it. Do you mind explaining like what parts or what kind of aspects of it were automated?
Sure. So in factory automation, as far as where I worked, there are a lot of the processes that we have to go through, and most of the process that I saw and I was experiencing had already been automated, and they are moving forward with less of humans handling. So that's what I meant by automation. But autonomous system basically means no humans, and it's not pre-programmed. It's learning by itself. So yeah.
I see. All right. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we just spoke with a former contractor, hearing firsthand how advanced systems are already on the ground, how workers are reacting to, and how he personally views this shift. And that brings us to the bigger picture beyond the factory floor. So how should we, Mumbin, approach jobs employment in the AI era?
Right, so the ILO, the International Labor Organization, doesn't expect that AI will instantly replace every single existing job like we talked about in the interview. However, the role of humans in labor will definitely shift in some ways. This means that although not all jobs will be gone, there will be some changes, and we know changes always come at a cost. Although it is against the nature of capitalism, the company should work out a structure or a transitions phase or a system that guarantees some degree of security and stability to the current human workers and laborers. And moreover, the government must also review and revise the laws to protect the laborers, but not prohibiting companies to completely use AI technology, as that may result in decrease of the competitiveness of our country industry.
So the key takeaway is a shared responsibility between companies and governments to cushion that impact. And for the younger generations, the question becomes less about fear and more about readiness. So how should the younger generations prepare for the AI era, Niall?
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned the government level and the company level, and on individual level, since the technological development of AI can't be stopped, it's inevitable. The AI era will indeed come for sure. However, I think it's a little bit early to worry in advance. The key characteristic of an AI era is not that all jobs will disappear. In fact, some studies show that it will actually create more jobs. So perhaps it's a different way of having occupation rather than the ones that we know from the past. But the era of doing the same job for an entire lifetime, maybe that is what has passed. Fortunately, many of the millennials and Gen Z is more familiar with the digital environment and better at adapting to changes than the older generations. So hopefully we will all navigate this change and situation as it comes along the way.
Right, I hope so too. So as AI continues to reshape the factory floor, the real question isn't just how far the technology can go, but how we choose to adapt alongside it. Balancing innovation with job security will be key to making this transition work for everyone. And ultimately, the future of work in the AI era may depend less on the machines themselves and more on how we prepare people for what comes next. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation. But News Gen will be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time with more stories and discussions. A big thanks to Wonbin.
Always a pleasure.
And also Niall.
Lovely to be here.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for watching. And hopefully we'll keep using AI wisely while staying on good terms with the robots. We are
News Generation.
저는 만 5살에 바이올린을 시작했는데요. 바이올린 소리를 워낙 좋아했어서 그 특유의 따뜻함과 약간 사람의 목소리 같은 목소리를 갖고 있거든요, 바이올린이. 저는 무대에 올랐을 때보다는 이제 혼자 연습할 때 더 큰 희열을 느끼는데 제가 표현하고자 하는 음악이 잘 나왔을 때 그때 가장 큰 기쁨을 느끼는 것 같아요. 그래서 저만의 색깔을 어떻게 하면 찾아갈 수 있을까 그걸 제일 많이 고민하는 것 같아요.